Great. Well, hopefully everyone can hear me okay. And I'd just like to start by saying again, thank you so much for joining. Hopefully this will be an enjoyable and enlightening presentation, again, about why insights can be hard to reach. So from a qualitative researcher perspective, we're really all after the same thing, deeper insights. As such, we believe it's important to understand the major psychological factors that influence a consumer in order to really be able to move beyond surface-level answers for our clients. These factors include attitudes, motivations, and perceptions, as each has a big impact on brand and product selection, as well as brand loyalty. Essentially understanding how a consumer perceives the brand, their attitudes towards the brand, and what motivates them allows us to get to the emotional benefits of why they make a purchase. And what I mean by that is while some consumers make decisions based solely on a balance of price or product feature, like a commodity product, brand selection, and most importantly, brand loyalty, is also a function of the value a consumer sees the brand as having to them. So for example, it creates a sense of pride for me if I own the latest iPhone or if I drive a particular type of car. And this is based on an emotional benefit. Learning the whys of consumer behavior, however, is not always so easy. In fact, it's often downright difficult to get to these psychological factors. By and large, people don't know how to unlock the deeper side of their psyche, which of course contains their most innermost thoughts and feelings, the very essence of their individuality. More specifically, people aren't so good at analyzing their own motivations and the basis for their actions. It's not always easy for respondents to articulate or elucidate on certain topics, even if they do know and understand what's driving them. All this said, at the end of the day, respondents are frequently unaware of the role their underlying motives, aspirations, values, and attitudes play when they're buying a product or they're selecting one brand over another. So we've covered what the barriers are, and now we'll switch our focus to the factors that make accessing this information challenging. One being that, quite simply, memories are not readily played back like videotapes. They need to be reconstructed in the moment of the telling, and it's difficult for respondents to do so, and they usually actually need some help reconstructing their memories. Also, while emotions and imagery are key to our relationships with brands, they're right brain happenings, whereas language is left brained. This also makes it hard for respondents to communicate their feelings. Building on this is the fact that the majority of decision making is unconscious. The implication here, of course, is that decisions involve a lot of non-rational input, and it becomes our job to uncover the other than rational and the less than easily discussed inputs. Finally, social conventions. What a respondent thinks are the right answers can also constrain his or her expression of feelings. Instead of reporting what they may actually be thinking or feeling, they offer up what they think is the more socially acceptable response. As a result of these barriers, in certain circumstances, it's all but impossible to obtain accurate information about what people really think and feel by asking them to talk about their thoughts and feelings with direct questioning. Direct questioning, while appropriate sometimes, quite often limits the depth of insight that a respondent is able to provide. It may only uncover surface answers, and in fact, it can encourage very logical thinking. Moreover, direct questioning will likely not help a respondent with any anxiety they may have about the research process or working with a particular researcher, nor any concerns they may have about being judged by others. As researchers, the problem is that direct questioning quite frequently only generates insights that are consistent with the cultural and personal theories that are easily accessible by the respondent. So, in sum, there are a lot of factors that can make it difficult for a respondent to share how they feel or think about a topic and direct questioning is quite often not the answer. The good news is that there's a wide range of different techniques and approaches that we can use as researchers to bypass some of these barriers respondents face in unlocking their true feelings. Different qualitative techniques, strategies, and question types can be applied to get us past surface answers and easy platitudes to uncover the deeper level of feelings that drive respondent attitudes, thoughts, and behaviors. So briefly, some techniques which I suspect you're very familiar with. First, projective and enabling techniques. Projective techniques, of course, can overlap with enabling techniques, and they're really useful at allowing a respondent to articulate repressed or withheld feelings by projecting onto another character. So an example that I suspect a lot of you have heard or either used in your research lives, if this brand were a car, what kind of car would it be? Enabling techniques are very similar, and what they do is they allow the research participant to find a means of expressing feelings and thoughts which they otherwise would find difficult to articulate. So for example, you might give a respondent a particular topic and ask them just to jot down all of the words that come to mind. In addition to these projective and enabling techniques, there's also the opportunity to create a custom approach. And by that, I mean an approach that's created by the researcher to meet a specific need and to align with their core competency. So here at iModerate, we have developed a custom approach which draws upon numerous theories and techniques, including some projective and enabling techniques, but it's really been developed to align with our specific online methodology. These next two slides show a handful of examples of projective and enabling techniques which you may or may not have worked with before. I think these first three are pretty common. First, we have mind mapping on the left. Mind mapping is essentially a graphical way to represent ideas and concepts. You can think of it as a visual thinking tool that helps respondents better recall and generate new ideas. Mind mapping can be used to uncover brand associations, brand experiences, what traits are most important to a person when they're thinking of a brand. In the example here, the topic, which was mind mapping, is the center of the drawing, and then each offshoot and each branch represents an association from that topic. Next, we have bubble drawings and cartoon tests, and they provide an opportunity for a respondent to fill in the thought or the speech bubbles of the characters depicted here. The technique is really useful at helping us reveal consumers' true behavior and their true motivations as compared with what they declare. And by that I mean the technique can give us insight to a respondent's true perceptions and their expectations. So in a real-life scenario, our respondent could be given a bubble map and asked to imagine that they're talking with their real estate management company, for example, about the service they've received or haven't received. They could also be asked to imagine an ideal conversation with a car salesman. And then thirdly, we have image and mood boards. In this type of exercise, respondents are asked to pick from a moderator-prepared board of images. They're supposed to pick images that personify or make them think of the brand or topic under question, and then we ask them to compare and contrast. And what this technique does is it helps us reveal consumer perceptions of a target brand, a target product, company, category, in a very indirect way. So in practice, respondents might be asked to work in a small group to prepare a visual manifestation, so to speak, of the subject matter at hand, be it a brand, a service, an ideal proposition. They'd assemble the pictures that they associate with their thoughts on the subject and then discuss. We also thought it would be fun to share a few less common projective and enabling techniques. Our first example is called the time machine. In this exercise, participants are asked to get into a time-traveling machine and travel to the future. When they arrive, they're asked to see the differences between what they see here versus what they saw before they traveled in time. We ask them to examine the different products they see here and to think about these products' benefits and drawbacks. This type of exercise is really useful at generating new product development ideas by focusing on expected future needs. It's also useful for creating a wish list for product modifications. The next example is called Planetarium, and in this exercise, this is actually the image that's on the slide. Participants are asked to imagine brands as planets of the solar system, and they're all revolving around an ideal brand, the sun. So in this example, I'm really able to see how this individual was able to think about the different car brands in relation to their ideal brand. Here, Lexus, Audi, Cherokee, Subaru, Alfa Romeo, those were all the brands that were most closely aligned with their ideal brand. And then finally, withdrawal techniques. And this is a way to better understand consumers' relationships with brands and products by actually taking them away from them. So, for example, you might ask a participant to spend a period of time living without a particular brand or product, say your laundry detergent or your preferred brand of soda, and would ask them to record their experience by diary or a video camera. And the inputs from this can be really interesting, as it really gives us a window into their relationship with the brand and product, as well as the role that they play in their wider lives. So wrapping up our section on projective and enabling techniques, when deciding which approach is right for your project, it is of course important to match your needs to the technique. And by that I mean, in addition to making sure you have the right technique for your objective and methodology, you also need to understand your audience. Not all respondents are word-oriented, and many of them see pictures in their heads or respond better to visuals. So a combination of visual and verbal projective techniques often work better to cover most people. That said, it can also be useful to incorporate other senses, touch, smell, taste, in order to provide respondents with a number of different ways of expressing themselves. It's also important to consider the sector in which you're operating. In a market where a product is strongly branded, consumers will find it relatively easy to answer projective questions, and their answers are likely to be relatively reliable because there's a lot of material for them to draw from. So some questions to ask yourself: is this a sector that's strongly branded or relatively undifferentiated? Do people have powerful feelings about the sector, or is there consumer apathy? And the answers to this type of question can give you some useful information in terms of choosing an appropriate type of projective or enabling technique. One other consideration, because many of these techniques require respondents to step out of their comfort zones, it's also necessary to create a research environment where the respondents feel comfortable and free to speak their minds. So instead of sitting around a table in a focus group facility, for example, it might be more appropriate to sit in a group of chairs or couches. Now we're going to turn to a custom approach. So what happens if you're struggling as to which techniques are the right fit for what you do on a daily basis? As I mentioned earlier, there's also the opportunity to create a custom approach. If this is the route that you choose to take, basically step back, take a holistic look at your organization, and start the process from there. Understanding how your methodology fits with what research questions you answer will help you align with an approach to uncover deeper insights. You may choose an approach that utilizes a psychological theory for its foundation, or you may use a combination of several techniques, projective, enabling, experiential, that will create a right mix for you to uncover consumers' emotional feelings. This is the process that we went through at iModerate. We spent the better part of a year looking at what we do, and we found that what we were doing and where we wanted our insights to be aligned very closely with 3 cognitive theories. Now, you may have heard of some of these cognitive theories, as they are pretty common, but we found them to be extremely effective with our online methodology. Just to give you a little bit of context, we specialize in real-time one-on-one sessions. We can either integrate into a quant survey, or we can conduct the sessions as a standalone. So turning in more detail then to the theories, perception theory really looks at how the human brain perceives the world. Simply put, at any given time, every individual naturally goes through a 4 steps to process information. They notice, they categorize, they group, and they infer. Using perception theory allows us to cut through easy platitudes that, oh, it's nice and I like it, and to tap into people's deeper, sometimes unconscious thoughts. So, for example, clients will often come to us with an ad test. They're really worried about a particular component or element. Rather than asking the questions directly, we'll ask consumers to describe what they notice about the ad. If they don't mention that specific element or concern, we know that it's an area that the client does not need to be concerned about. Second, we have identity theory. Identity theory looks at how people define who they are and where they belong in the world. It's a me or not me equation. By making a point to understand how consumers see themselves and who they aspire to be, we can more easily understand what is relevant to them and the choices that they make. For instance, if we know that a consumer sees themselves as a young professional fashionista, we can get a better sense as to why or why they don't gravitate towards a certain brand or message. Finally, phenomenology or experience theory. Phenomenology is, at its very heart, the study of consumer experiences from their point of view. Using phenomenology lets a consumer paint their own picture and allows us to understand and isolate which experiences most accurately inform how they connect to a particular brand. Ultimately, we found that this custom approach not only allows us to get at beyond the surface level insights, but it gives our team the skills they need to determine which techniques, be they projective, enabling, or something else, are appropriate for a particular given project. So in conclusion, there are a few things to keep in mind when using these projective, enabling, and even custom approaches. First, while they are extremely effective at generating rich insight, alleviating barriers, and getting to a deeper emotional level, the complexity of insight means that you really need to make sure you have the appropriate skill set with which to analyze the results. Using the coolest and most innovative techniques in the session can get you some great insight, but you're going to be in a bit of a pickle at the end if you don't have anyone on your team who can interpret those results for you. And then finally, depending on the technique employed, some of these methods may end up being expensive, and they can be quite time-intensive to set up. So those are the slides that I have for you, and with that, I guess I will turn this back over to Sue to field any questions that you all may have.